The Sony ZV-E1 has just come out for travel vloggers. I'm a travel vlogger, but I am moving over to the Sony a7 Mark IV. I want you to fight me about this decision in the comments, but let's go on a walk and discuss why I've gone for this setup and why it's better for me. The ZV-E1 has far too much hype around it, so let's keep it to the facts and keep it simple. Both cameras do 10-bit 422. The only difference that you're going to notice is that on the A7 Mark IV, the 50 or 60 FPS is cropped. The crop is only going to be an issue if you particularly need slow motion with a super wide field of view. The likelihood is when you're using 50 FPS, you're going to be facing the camera the other way around. However, the A7 Mark IV's ability to crop gives us extra reach, meaning that we can punch in not just that 1.5x on the clear zoom, but also 1.5x on the APS-C mode. This means we can actually extend the max focal length of our lens on this camera by 200%. Although this doesn't change compression or the way your image looks, it's really useful having that extra reach. The reason why I'm not going to include 120 FPS 4K in this is, first of all, because at the present time it's not out. The fact that Sony haven't put it out with the camera release, although it is promised as an update, suggests that it's pretty intense. And with a camera that already struggles with maintaining its heat, or technically losing its heat, the chances are 4K 120, although may become available, is going to be more of a gimmick. Actually, gimmick might be unfair. It will be a nice to have. It's something that you're not going to buy the camera to use, but it's going to be there for the rare instances that you want to. Just don't be particularly upset if you buy the ZV-E1 to do 4K 120 FPS. And then find it can only do 5 to 10 minutes before needing to cool down. On the topic of overheating comes the weight and size comparisons between these two cameras. Now, it is impressive what they've done, don't get me wrong. But when you look at it without the hype, does a slightly smaller camera body actually enable you to do anything new? That weight difference is majoritively a cooling system, which makes the A7 Mark IV superior for a lot of people, even vloggers, which the other camera is obviously targeted at. If bringing the very slightly heavier camera means that you have that extra reach with that APS-C crop, that means you don't need to bring an additional lens, then you're actually saving weight. I am slightly biased when it comes to heat and overheating cameras because my first mirrorless setup was an A6-300. They were renowned for overheating very quickly, but I would say that the ZV-E1 is basically the same kind of genre. It's a camera that's offering the highest features in the base price. So it's very possible they intentionally kneecap it to avoid it taking away from their main camera sales. Let's talk stabilisation. I've been filming this whole video handheld and I am now running down a hill. Obviously that was an extreme example and there are a few other things I need to mention. The first is that the max settings in the ZV-E1 for stabilisation are going to get you a better image directly out camera. If you don't want to mess around at all, it's going to be more stable. I'm using gyro data for all these handheld shots in this video, but I am achieving this through a super easy workflow that I will be putting out as a video. It's really decent, incredibly easy, and you don't have to render any additional files. You can do it straight in DaVinci Resolve. Make sure you subscribe and don't miss out. Burnt in Luts, black bars and other creative looks I have never understood. If you want a simple workflow for that doesn't take any time, then just do a whole timeline node on DaVinci Resolve. It's extremely simple. Otherwise, the footage that you do have on these, especially if you've got the black bars in, you're going to lose video information. You're going to have a fixed look that you can never change. It's embedded on your footage and you can't do anything about it. It just doesn't make sense to me. What if you want to make some adverts or videos out of your old archival footage and it's all got different bars on, different LUTs bedded into it? So although some people like that, and if it's good for your workflow, great, I don't feel like it's something that you can compare against these two cameras. We haven't even mentioned the price yet. With the A7 Mark IV being an older camera, you can get it from places like E-Infinity for under £2,000. Whereas being the newer camera, the E1 is clocking in at £2,350. It's the cheapest I can find it. So there's actually a £350 difference that you can save by going down the route of the Mark IV, or on that thought, for £350, you're starting to look at getting a pretty decent little drone that will fit in your pocket and add a whole new variety of shots to your videos that you're making. There are two things that do have a big improvement over the Mark IV on the E1. The first is autofocus. It is a big leap, there is no doubt about that, but the Mark IV is still very good. So unless you're chasing scenarios where you really need to nail your focus, then you're probably going to be alright on the Mark IV. The second is rolling shutter, but I've come to the conclusion that if that's something that you genuinely notice and is going to make a difference for you, then the ZV-E1 probably isn't for you. You probably want to go for one of the slightly higher up cameras. The new microphone also looks pretty good. That being said, if you're filming in any kind of noisy or echoey environment, then a wireless setup, which you can buy with the £350 you've saved, is going to do you an awful lot of good. So my conclusion on the ZV-E1. I find it's in a very tricky space. If you're chasing a lightweight setup for vlogging, it's very hard for me not to recommend the latest iPhone paired with something like an Insta360, which will be your all-in-one filming and editing setup. If you're chasing a more filmic look, then an APS-C setup is going to also come with a lighter lens, and for most people the difference in sensor size isn't going to be noticed. If compression's super important to you and you really want a full frame sensor, then the likelihood is that at some point you're going to want to do long format content. If you want to do anything on that list, then unless you're in a very controlled environment or live in a cool climate, the ZV-E1 is likely to overheat and stop working, and at that point any camera is better than it. So who do I think this camera is actually aimed at? It's perfect for people who already have a full frame Sony setup and want to occasionally take out a lighter camera for a quick weekend trip than the heavier setups that they already have. See you soon.